In 8.6, we're going to be talking about radical equations and problem solving. More specifically, the Pythagorean theorem and the distance formula. Some of you may recall what the distance formula or the Pythagorean theorem is, but let's refresh our memories. If we have a right triangle, we will have two legs and a hypotenuse. And what the Pythagorean theorem says is that we will take the of the two legs, so we'll label those legs A and B, a squared plus b squared, and that will equal the square of the hypotenuse, which we'll square say is c. So basically with the Pythagorean theorem is if you have a right triangle and you're given two of the three sides, you'll be able to find the distance or the length of the third side. So if we take a look at number 1, we have two of the sides and we're going to try to find the length of this leg labeled x. The hypotenuse is opposite the right triangle, so it's 6, and 3 is the other leg. So if we use that formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, again, a and b refer to the legs, c the hypotenuse, and we basically just plug in. X and 3 get replaced into the a and the b, and the 6 replaces the hypotenuse. And then you'll start evaluating. X squared plus 9 equals 36. X squared equals 27. And take the square root of 27. You get x equals square root of 27. But we also need to remember that we need to simplify radicals. So this breaks down into square root of 9, square root of 3. Square root of 9 becomes 3. Square root of 3 is our length of that missing side. In some of the problems coming up in your homework, you're actually not going to be given a diagram. You're going to be given it in words. So you're going to have to create your own right triangle. And in this case, if A and B are the legs of a right triangle and C is the hypotenuse, find B if A equals 4 and B equals C. So we'll draw our little triangle. And it says A and B are the legs. So it doesn't matter which is which. You can always change it so it's to scale. We know that A is 4 and C is 8. And what we're trying to find is B. So we'll go ahead and plug it in. A squared, so 4 squared plus B squared, and that equals 8 squared, the hypotenuse. And again, you're just going to evaluate 16 and 64. We'll subtract 16 to get 48. And then we'll take the square root of both sides to get rid of the square. And you end up getting b equals square root of 48. But hopefully you'll notice that 48 is also can be simplified for the radical by 16 and 3. 16 is that perfect square that we're looking for. And that becomes 4 square root of 3. For the second half of the video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the distance formula and how you find the distance between 2 points. If it's at a diagonal, like you see right here, you can't just count the squares because, again, it's at a slant, so it's not directly proportioned. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to think about it as, well, what if I went directly right and then directly up? You'll notice that it forms a right triangle. And if we count over, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So we go over to the right 4. And we end up going up 1, 2, 3 to get to there. That also To get from 1 to 5, that's how we get the 4. And to get to 2 to 5, that's where we get the 3. Now, if we look at the triangle, we have 2 out of the 3 missing sides. So we have 4 and 3, so we'll square those. And that gives us the hypotenuse. So we 16 plus 9 equals c squared. 25 equals c squared, square root both sides, and you'll notice that the hypotenuse is 5. But let's back up a little bit. What if we didn't know exactly what those numbers were? And we are just trying to find the distance between the two. So if I have the first coordinate point right here, to get that coordinate point, it's an x value and then a y value. And it's the first one, so we're going to use subscript y1, y2. And over in this coordinate point, it's the second point, and it's x and y, but since it's the second, it's x2, y2. Now, forget about those numbers for a second, but again, go to the concept that we're going horizontally. Horizontal is the x-axis. So how do I go from x1 to x2? Well, you're subtracting. You're doing x2 minus x1, and that gives you the difference and the distance to go horizontally. Now think about when you go up in this case. That's the y-axis. So what you're doing is you're subtracting y2 from y1. Now let's go back to that Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, a squared, or a in this case, is our horizontal distance, which is x2 minus x1. So that's going to replace that, x2 minus x1, and that's squared. B in this case is our y distance. That's y2 minus y1 squared. And then finally what c is c is our distance here. So that's d squared. Now if I'm trying to find the distance, I'm going to take the square root of it because that will give me d by itself. So distance between 2 points can be found as x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And this is something that you will actually need to have memorized. x2 minus x1 squared plus the quantity y2 minus y1 squared, and then you take the square root of that number, and that will give you the distance between 2 points. And what we're going to do is we're going to quickly use that example, or that formula, just to do one example. So if I'm given 2 points, and I want to find the distance between the 2 points, all you have to do is label one point as your first point, and the second one as your second. It doesn't matter which one, but it's important that you stay consistent. So if this is point 1, this is my x, that's my y, and I'm going to do 1 and 1 for being point 1. And if I label this as point 2, this is x2, y2. Remember, the first spot is always x, the second spot's always y. From there, all you're going to do is plug into the formula up at the top. So I'm going to take the square root of all of this. x2 is negative 11. So negative 11 minus negative 6. And then we're going to square that. We're then going to add it to y2, which is 5, minus y1, which is 2. And we'll square that. And then you got to remember your order of operations. You do your parentheses first. So negative 11 minus a negative, that's going to become positive. So that becomes negative 5 squared plus 3 squared. We're going to continue over here. Negative 5 squared is 25. 3 squared is 9, and that becomes 34. And you actually can't simplify the square root of 34, so we'll leave it as square root of 34. Again, just be careful with your order of operations when you're working with this.